What if I told you some of your favorite horror movies were based on real-life nightmares? These aren't just stories, they happened. The haunting possession, the twisted killer, the deadly dreams. They all have roots in terrifying truths. Welcome back to my channel, where I uncover the dark and unsettling truths behind the stories you thought you knew. Horror movies are scary enough, but when the fiction is based on reality, the fear becomes unforgettable. Today, let's dive into 3 chilling true stories that inspired some of the most iconic horror films of all time. From a real-life exorcism to a murderer with a dark obsession to nightmares that kill, this episode is not for the faint of heart. Let's start with The Exorcist, one of the most terrifying films ever made. Released in 1973 and directed by William Friedkin, this supernatural horror is widely regarded as a genre-defining masterpiece. It shocked audiences with its disturbing imagery, groundbreaking special effects, and unsettling portrayal of demonic possession. The film was so intense that moviegoers fainted, vomited, and fled theaters in fear. But what many don't know is that The Exorcist was inspired by a chilling true story of possession that occurred decades earlier. The real-life events that inspired the movie took place in 1949 in Maryland and involved a boy referred to as Roland Doe to protect his identity. Roland, a 14-year-old boy, reportedly became the target of a malevolent force after experimenting with a Ouija board. Soon after, his family began witnessing strange phenomena, objects flying across the room, scratching noises in the walls, and unexplainable shaking of Roland's bed. As the situation worsened, Roland himself exhibited terrifying behaviors, speaking in guttural voices, screaming in foreign languages he had never learned, and developing scratches and welts on his body, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. Desperate for help, his family turned to the Catholic Church. Over the course of a grueling 30-day exorcism performed by multiple priests, Roland reportedly levitated, displayed superhuman strength, and exhibited violent outbursts. Witnesses claimed the boy's behavior was so extreme that it seemed impossible to attribute it to mental illness alone. Eventually, the priests declared Roland free of possession, and the boy went on to live a relatively normal life. Author William Peter Blatty stumbled upon Roland Doe's story while attending Georgetown University. Fascinated by the account, he used it as the basis for his 1971 novel, The Exorcist, which later became the script for the film. While Blatty stayed true to many details from the original story, he also made significant changes for dramatic effect. In the movie, Roland was reimagined as a 12-year-old girl named Reagan McNeil. The film also amplified the supernatural elements, adding head spinning, projectile vomiting, and the infamous spider walk scene. These additions, while fictional, made the story even more horrifying for audiences. So, while The Exorcist may seem like pure Hollywood horror, it's rooted in real-life events that were just as disturbing. Roland Doe's case continues to baffle skeptics and believers alike. The scariest stories are the ones based on reality. Next, we'll explore another chilling tale, one that inspired Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and gave us one of cinema's most unforgettable villains. Next on our list is Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 classic Psycho, a film that revolutionized the psychological horror genre. With its shocking twist, eerie score, and unforgettable shower scene, Psycho is often hailed as one of the greatest films of all time. But what made this movie even more spine-chilling was its connection to a real-life killer whose gruesome crimes shocked the nation, Ed Gein, better known as the Butcher of Plainfield. Ed Gein lived a quiet, isolated life in the rural town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. Outwardly, he seemed like an odd but harmless loner. However, when police investigated him in 1957 for the disappearance of a local woman, they uncovered horrors straight out of a nightmare. Inside Gein's dilapidated farmhouse, authorities found human remains repurposed into grotesque household items, a lampshade and chair seats made from human skin, bowls crafted from skulls, and even a belt made of nipples. Most chilling of all, Gein had fashioned a woman's suit out of human flesh, a macabre tribute to his deceased mother Augusta, with whom he had an unhealthy and obsessive relationship. While Gein confessed to only 2 murders, it was discovered that he had also been robbing graves to collect body parts for his grim projects. His crimes exposed the dark depths of his twisted psyche and left an indelible scar on the American consciousness. Ed Gein's horrific deeds caught the attention of writer Robert Bloch, who used him as inspiration for his 1959 novel Psycho. Bloch reimagined Gein's twisted relationship with his mother in the character of Norman Bates, a mild-mannered motel owner with a disturbing secret. In Alfred Hitchcock's film adaptation, Norman's psychology mirrors Gein's in many ways. Both men were deeply controlled by their domineering mothers, whose deaths pushed them into madness. Norman's habit of dressing as his mother to commit murders echoes Gein's grotesque woman suit. However, Hitchcock toned down the more graphic details of Gein's crimes, focusing instead on the psychological horror. Psycho remains a masterclass in suspense, but knowing it was inspired by the real-life horrors of Ed Gein adds a chilling layer of reality. Some monsters wear ordinary faces, and their crimes can be even darker than fiction. And if you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear about the real-life nightmares that inspired A Nightmare on Elm Street. Could a dream actually kill you? Let's find out. Our final story brings us to Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, released in 1984. This supernatural slasher introduced audiences to Freddy Krueger, a burned, knife-glove villain who stalks his victims in their dreams. Freddy's ability to blur the line between dreams and reality turned the simple act of sleeping into a horrifying gamble. The film became a cultural phenomenon, spawning a franchise and solidifying Freddy as one of the most iconic horror villains of all time. But the idea behind Freddy Krueger didn't come from thin air. It was inspired by a series of tragic and mysterious deaths. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, a strange and terrifying phenomenon began occurring among Southeast Asian immigrants in the United States, particularly among refugees from Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Healthy young men, many in their 20s and 30s, started dying in their sleep without any warning or clear medical explanation. The victims all reported similar experiences before their deaths, recurring, vivid nightmares so horrifying that they were afraid to fall asleep. Some would stay awake for days, terrified of what awaited them in their dreams. Despite their efforts, they eventually succumbed to exhaustion and tragically died in their sleep. This phenomenon, later classified as sudden unexpected nocturnal death syndrome, baffled doctors, while some theorized it was linked to heart arrhythmias or stress from cultural displacement. Others believed it was something far more sinister, possibly tied to folklore and beliefs in malevolent spirits. Wes Craven was deeply affected when he read an article about these deaths in the Los Angeles Times. He learned of a young boy who had stayed awake for several days, terrified of his dreams, only to eventually fall asleep. His family believed he was safe until they heard screams in the middle of the night and found him dead. In his room, they discovered a coffee maker he had hidden to keep himself awake. Craven combined this eerie true story with his own childhood fears to create Freddy Krueger. The concept of a killer who attacks you in your sleep was terrifyingly universal, because no one can avoid sleeping forever. Freddy's burned appearance, his finger-bladed glove, and his sadistic personality added layers to the character, but the idea of death through dreaming remained the heart of the story. The chilling deaths that inspired A Nightmare on Elm Street remain as mysterious today as they were decades ago. They remind us of the power of our fears and how sometimes even our dreams can turn deadly.